Good evening. I acknowledge on behalf of the Board of Trustees that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Likwitah people. I am John Kerr, Chairperson of the School District 72 Board of Education. In attendance virtually this evening is Trustee Richard Franklin and Trustee Joyce McMahon. Also present in person are Susan Wilson, Daryl Hagan, Shannon Briggs, Kat Eddy, and Daryl Hagan. I think, or did I mention you twice? Two. Okay, I'm here twice. I hope I've got everybody.
Yes.
Okay. Also in attendance are Superintendent Jeremy Morrow, Associate Superintendent Morgan Kyle, and Assistant Superintendents Morgan Kyle and Phil Sisnick, as well as Secretary Treasurer Kevin Patrick. Present also are Natalie Crawshaw, Assistant to the Secretary Treasurer, Jennifer Patrick, Manager of Communications, and providing technical support is Barb Drake, Manager of IT. The board begins this year meeting in person using appropriate COVID-19 protocols under advice from the District Health Officer. However, in-person attendance for the public is not possible at this time except for previously scheduled presentations, so this and future meetings will be available to the public online unless and until the District Health Officer directs the board otherwise. Please note that there's a 20-second production delay between the live event that you are viewing and meeting participants. The question and answer function is open for questions on agenda items for this meeting. Questions that are posed during the meeting will be addressed at the end of the session. In early October, Premier Horgan announced that boards would be responsible for making the decision on implementing a vaccine mandate for those in their employ. BCSTA and the British Columbia Public Sector Employers Association have created and circulated K-12 sector guidelines for vaccination policies. The guidelines were developed to support boards of education and authorities who choose to implement vaccination policy for their employees. The British Columbia Teachers Federation, QP, UNESCO, and other groups were also part of the process. And BCTF and QP have indicated their support for a province-wide vaccination mandate as well. The guidelines list 5 steps to be followed by boards, or 4 steps to be followed in boards in preparation for the implementation of a vaccine policy. The 5th step is to implement an operational plan. The earlier steps include gathering information, aligning with legal advice, public health guidance and orders, consulting with employee groups, First Nations, and engaging the community, and deciding whether to create a proof of vaccination policy. The board will have a great deal of work to do in this area before the final decision is made. Any decision on a proof of vaccination policy will be fraught with difficulties and include legal, labor, and moral issues, and I ask your forbearance during the process. Efforts to replace Cedar School, or Cedar Elementary, continues. In July, the board sent a letter to the Minister of Education with a request to consider this request. To this date, the board has not received acknowledgement of this letter. Actions over the past month have included presentations to the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee and to the Liaison Committee with the City of Campbell River. Andrea Craddock, QP President, has written a letter to the Minister and our MLA to support this initiative and has requested that her members do the same. The committee has also requested that all School District 72 employees write to the Minister and MLA supporting the replacement of this facility. Whether or not this will move the needle remains to be seen. Meanwhile, I encourage anyone who is concerned with equity and student achievement in our district to write the Minister in support of this initiative. For further information, please visit the School District 72 website and take 6 minutes to view the video that has been created to explain the need for a new school and the board's vision for it. 2 weeks ago, I attended a 2-day conference in Vancouver. The first day was a meeting of board chairs and included discussions on proof of vaccination mandate. There appeared to be the expectation that boards would implement a policy on vaccinations for employees as a, quote, condition of employment, unquote. It was pointed out on several occasions that it is a moral imperative for boards to take measures that will ensure the health and safety of our students and our employees. However, this board will make a final decision based on what we believe is the need of the community. Another major topic of discussion was equity. Presenters pointed out the importance of having and using data to inform educational decisions. The First Nations Education Steering Committee, FNESC, supports the use of the FSA to gather some of this data because it is not the only province-wide assessment available that provides data on achievement and is necessary to effectively allocate resources. Day 2 was devoted to the work with Secretary Treasurers, Superintendents, and Board Chairs. The Minister again spoke about the proposed proof of vaccination mandate. The issue of mental health was mentioned, along with the province's commitment to allocate $5 million to districts to assist in dealing with the problem. This will amount to approximately $50,000 for School District 72. The framework for enhancing student learning was addressed as well. Briefly, the FESL is focused on improving educational outcome for all students in BC, with an emphasis on improving the educational achievement of Indigenous students, children and youth in care, and students with disabilities or diverse abilities. Finally, the semi-annual liaison meeting with the City of Campbell River was held yesterday. The main takeaway for me was that the City wishes to work cooperatively with the district in areas of mutual concern and interest, and that the City fully supports the replacement of Cedar Elementary. It seems to me that the work of the board is becoming more demanding and complicated, and I wish to commend our management team and school staff who continue to overcome many challenges under trying circumstances, and our trustees who continue to ably represent the people of our community. Thanks to all of you. Okay, we will move to item 2, which will be the superintendent's remarks. Dr. Morrow.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Kerr. I want to start by sharing a celebratory email that I received this morning from a parent who also happens to be a teacher in our district. And it's actually about one of our student alumni, Marion Shields Brown, who attended EDM and then at Cole Phoenix and then graduated from Carey High in 2017. Marion was actually chosen to speak at the SFU Fall Convocation Ceremony that took place this month for the graduating class of 2021. This is where she was celebrated for graduating with a degree from the Resource Environmental Management faculty, as also celebrating her participation in SFU as an integral part of the NCAA SFU track team that traveled all over the states for meets, and also she made the Dean's List for 6 consecutive terms. And it's just another piece. When we talk tonight, we'll look at some student data, but our student data is all about those individual stories of our students. And it was such a neat email to get from a proud mom and a proud teacher of a young lady who's very successful, who was a young lady in the Campbell River School District. So congratulations to Marion and her family. I want to share as well on the good news track that last week on the 21st, the School District 72 received a Fortis BC Efficiency in Action Award for upgrading to high efficiency boilers at Colwell Point at Phoenix Middle School, as well as installing a condensing makeup air unit as part of the ventilation upgrade for Southgate's woodshop. Combined, these projects result in an annual greenhouse gas reduction of approximately 106 tons of carbon dioxide and a $38,400 savings for operations. So School District 72 is the 3rd school district ever to receive this recognition from Fortis BC, and it's a good opportunity to take tonight to acknowledge the leadership of Operations Manager Steve Woods, HVAC lead hand Wesley Sharp, and our electrical lead hand Christopher Lorenzetto, and the rest of the HVAC and electrical teams. Also a little plug for our international program. We have a wonderful group of international students that are here in Campbell River, and as the success of that program continues to grow, that the international program is looking for potential host families, and you can check out the website on the international program for information on becoming a homestay parent. I wanted to briefly mention as well, and I know Trustee Briggs will have a more thorough update for trustees and the public regarding a wonderful meeting we had last week on Friday, the Professional Development Day, where we got to sit and learn and listen to the wisdom of some student leaders within our district. And I know that there will be a further update, but I wanted to share just how positive it was to be able to meet with those student leaders. So this week, the 25th to the 29th, is School Library Week. And we recognize the central role in our district that teacher librarians play in the education and development of their students. Our school libraries have become learning hubs and Learning Commons, where it becomes very much the hub of the school and lots of energy and excitement and really neat collaborative projects that are taking place. But it's also an opportunity of these spaces offer opportunities for students to explore new worlds and to become their best selves through access to multimedia content, educational programs, and other resources curated by our teacher librarians. Next Monday, November the 1st, is a district-wide Professional Development Day, and it helps us continue to fulfill the board's policy of ensuring that time is dedicated each year to educating all staff around local Indigenous peoples and some of the needs and current events connected to our Indigenous learners. So it's a day called Transformation for Social Change. It's a day where every single member of our staff community is invited and expected to participate in further understanding their collective ownership and work in creating positive, respectful, equitable environments within our school communities. And I particularly wanted to acknowledge the organization and leadership work of Erin Pickering, Jillian Kirk, and Deb Mertel in putting that day together for us on Monday. And then lastly, I just want to finish by sharing that later tonight I will be presenting to the board on some of the data that is part of the framework for enhanced student learning that Chairperson Kerr mentioned, and that is part of that provincial order. And I know and wanted to acknowledge that this is a board of education who has asked for learning data to help guide decision making, and tonight I will be pleased to share some encouraging achievement trends from the last school year. And while there are still targeted areas to improve, there is some strengths emerging from our learning data, and I look forward to sharing that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Morrow. Move to the next item, and that is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of September 28th, 2021. The suggested motion is that the minutes of the meeting of September 28th, 2021 are hereby approved as circulated. Okay, Trustee Eddy and Trustee Hagan. Is there any discussion? Question, all those in favor? Okay, I don't see Trustee Franklin there, but okay, anyway, the motion is passed. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, are there any additions or alterations to the agenda?
Can I just ask a question? So we do have the summer school update on here, but I believe, is that going to be deferred or removed?
I'm giving a quick update.
You'll give an update on it? Okay.
So it will be you rather than, okay. All right, we will move then to the approval of the agenda, and the motion is that the agenda is hereby approved as circulated. Trustee Hagan, Trustee Wilson. All those in favor? Okay, the motion is carried. Moving to item 7, or 6, I'm sorry, 7. And that's the report of board decisions from the October 26, 2021 confidential meeting. Trustee Eddy.
Yes, this evening in our confidential portion of our meeting, we discussed lands, legal, and labor. We weren't able to finish our agenda, so we will be going back after the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to the next item then, and that is a public submission by the Campbell River Retired Teachers Association on the topic of school district history project and book. So I'll wait for them to get set up.
Get one? I think I was supposed to sit here. Okay. That'll work just fine. And mine? Sure. You're welcome to join me over here. Thank you. Susan, you want to come over here?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Good idea.
Bonnie? Okay, we can sit in the chair if you'd like. Okay, we would like to welcome teachers, retired teachers from this district. Barb Carey, who worked for many years at Pinecrest Elementary, and Bonnie Rosette, worked at many schools, but Willow Point was the last one. I had the pleasure of working with both these ladies before I retired. So, please begin.
Bonnie is the president of the Campbell River Retired Teachers Association, and we're seeking funding to publish a book. And I'd like to read a few things about the book and tell you about it and give you a good idea of what's involved. This project was begun by the Campbell River Retired Teachers Association when we realized there was no record at the local school board office about the school district prior to 1980. And as it was the 75th anniversary of the BC Retired Teachers Association, we decided it might be an idea to present a summary of the schools of the first 100 years. That turned out to be 1893 to 1993. The project begins with a summary of pioneer people living in our present school district, where they came from and how they were encouraged to settle here. A map of the Discovery Islands indicates the islands and settlements in the area which were settled first. There is a brief description of the importance of the Union steamships to these settlements. Also included is who provided the teachers and paid their salaries, and who was responsible for providing the school building. Now, the schools in the Campbell River area at that time were all assisted schools. They were not classified as rural schools. And assisted schools, the teacher was provided by the government, but the school was the responsibility of whoever's children were going to go to that school. Now, the first school in the district was at the Indian Reserve at Cape Mudge, and they provided many interesting anecdotes and pictures of the first teachers at Cape Mudge in 1893. And the first teachers were the Walkers. And they were placed in that position because Billy Asue, who was the chief at the time, realized that the only way the native population was going to get anywhere with with what they wanted to do, they had to know English, they had to be able to write it, and they had to be able to read it and speak it. And that's why he pursued having the school there. He was not interested in the religious side of it at all, because they had their own culture. And so when the Walkers first arrived, they were really welcomed nicely, and they thought, geez, this is wonderful. We'll go into the longhouse and we'll have a service tomorrow morning for everybody. Nobody showed because they didn't want, at that time, they were not interested in the religion. But this couple was so nice and so well received by the native population that they gradually got the people interested in the church. And I have quite an extensive write-up about that school and what other things went on. Their eldest daughter, became the first school at Harriet Bay, first school teacher at Harriet Bay. There were 11 schools on Cortes Island, and the museum at Cortes Island was really, really wonderful in all the information that they emailed to me. It was just spectacular. It was all there. Funny stories about the kids pulling tricks on the teachers and the teachers leaving after one horrible night in one of the villages. It was really very interesting. There were also schools on Sonora Island. There were 3 on Reed Island, East Thurlow, Stewart Island, Redondo Islands, and Hardwick Islands. And what I did was I took the Discovery schools in the Discovery Islands first, and I went north to Hardwick Island. And Ben Dixon was logging and Kelsey was logging in Hardwick Island at that time. And Ben Dixon had his camp on a float, and he had the school there as well. He had 7 children, so he only needed 1 extra child to get a teacher everywhere he went. So he was pretty well educated. His kids were, and there seemed to be no problems with him getting a teacher. Then I went over to and all of these islands and whatnot were populated, and they made their living through mining, fishing, fish canneries, and most of all with the logging. And they logged off the beach. And when they couldn't get the logs dragged towards the water, they stopped and they'd move on to somewhere else. So it wasn't exactly a very attractive place where these children were brought up. Then I went into Sayward, and thanks to Sandra McKinley, who provided me with photos and information on the early schools in the Sayward Valley. The first white settlement was in the 1890s, and I have 7 photos of these old schools, which are included along with short write-ups. There are pictures of Camp 2, which include the school, as well as a picture of 2 of the first teachers there. And it ends with the Sayward Brass Band completes the section on Sayward. It was beautifully written by Fred Shout and includes 5 pictures of his band students taken on their trip to the UK. And also it includes the other schools, the school that flooded constantly. I recall that, having to send school supplies. The water would rise halfway up the school walls, and finally they built the school in the town site instead of on the river. And then I went into Rock Bay, Elk Bay, Menzies Bay, and Rock Bay was a huge village of people. They had a hospital, they had a store, and of course the logging camps. And there are 5 pictures of Rock Bay. Included is also a school report dated March 6, 1923, and written about the teacher Lily A. Widowson by Ella Gertrude Martin, who must have been a school inspector. It describes the area where Lily is teaching. Then there was lots of logging on Elk Bay, and that was a purely float camp, so the school was on floats there. Menzies Bay was a very large concern with Blodell, Stewart, and Welch, and 2 other logging outfits in that bay. And the first teacher that went up to Menzies Bay was a brand new teacher from Victoria. Her name was Lil Emerson, and she taught there beginning in 1933. And I could not edit what she wrote. It was just so interesting and so unusual and really quite scary. Her mother comes up to check up on her, and I was just stunned that the mother thought her conditions living there were okay. She even had to clean the, everything was ready when she got there, but they didn't know she was coming, so she came without food. And there was no store or anything at Menzies Bay or anything like that. So she had a little bit of a rough go, but her mother thought it was okay, so she continued on there. And I think she stayed about 4 or 5 years. Then I went into more of a modern logging camp at Camp 5, which is at Brewster Lake. And at Marg Lagus wrote this article for me. And there were about 750 people living at Camp 5 at one time, so it was a very large camp, and it had 2 schools there. The largest outfit logging right out of Campbell River was the International Timber Company, and they became Elk River Timber and the ERT, and they had a camp at Camp 8 at Echo Lake, and Irene Quinn was the teacher there. And there's quite a bit of story about her, which she wrote about first going to Camp 8 at Echo Lake. No power, no water, no nothing, no insulation in the house, just, I don't know, anyway. There was also a logging camp at Willow Point, and but the largest one was at Menzies Bay. So I took all the logging camps went from Cedar all the way down to Oyster Bay. And that was an enormous concern. And after they stopped using trains for logging and they got into the trucks, they could really go into the woods farther and farther because the trains wouldn't allow them to go up steep inclines. And by the 50s, the trucks and cars were on the go. So the people from the logging camps who were coming into town now through the old railway beds, they came into Campbell River and they thought, well, we should live here. So there was an enormous influx of people into Campbell River in the 50s and 60s. They had the dam go in. They had all these people from the logging camps coming in, and then they opened the mill. So we had lots and lots of people there. So then I went into the Campbell River schools, and Janice Cousins did a write-up on the early schools for one of the courses she took at UVic. And she gave it to me, and it's all about the first school, which was the little school on the hill, and about the teachers there, and how far the children had to walk to school. Some of them came from Willow Point at that time and walked. And of course, there was no road or anything. It was all through the woods, heavily wooded, treed area. And and there's some really interesting stories about the Vanstones and the Perkins, because they lived on the other side of Campbell River and there was no bridge. So these kids rode across from one side of the mouth of the Campbell River to the spit and then walked. And they got caught a couple of times in very dicey weather and had to stay under logs on the spit before they were rescued by parents who could even get across the water there. I have a story about how the natives finally got the school they wanted on the spit in 1935. And they were really taken for a ride by us when they built Elm School, because they donated the land for Elm School and they thought their children were going to be allowed to go there, but they weren't. And so I just Campbell carried on with the various schools, and there were 4 schools that were built where Phoenix School is now. There were 4 schools there. And I have anecdotes that Bill Asue wrote about how they almost didn't make it across from Quathiaski Cove to Campbell River one morning because of the fog and the wind and everything else. And there were no navigation devices on this ferry, the Victory II, that they were traveling on. And so, but they did actually make it. And then the school board decided that if they found that it was too foggy, that they weren't expected to come to school and they could stay at on Quadra. The junior secondary, of course, burned down, and I've got newspaper articles about that, and Ron Anderson wrote a story about how he and the other teachers who were teaching at the secondary school got a lot of equipment out of the school. The school burned right to the ground because the fire hydrants in the area had been damaged and weren't usable beforehand. Anyway, he also wrote another article about how all the teachers managed the shift with Carey High. Instead of shifting with Southgate, they went on shift with Carey High, and a lot of the Carey High students got full-time jobs because they weren't at school for the full day. And it was the school board was quite anxious that those kids who had full-time jobs wouldn't come back, but they all came back when Phoenix was built, and they got the full use of Carey High again, which is good. And so every school is mentioned with photos and anecdotes that we've had in the school district. I even have an article about Arbutus School, which was the school for the mentally handicapped. And they used the old Campbell Falls School, which was at Campbell Falls and was towed to Camp 5, and then it was towed to Elm Street grounds and it was set up there for the handicapped children. There's quite an extensive article written by May Tunningly, and I got that from Reflections on the Early Years of Carey High, about John Young and his revolutionary ideas and how unaccepted they were by many of the old guard in Campbell River, and how some of us really thought he was on the mark, but it was just a huge fight, and he eventually left and became the headmaster at Shawnigan Lake Boys School. And I know he was chairman of the school board in Victoria for a number of years. There's quite an extensive article about Central Elementary School, and because just after it was completed, the students from Cayugat came into Campbell River because they'd had no school. The school wasn't worth being in. So all those students were shipped into Campbell River, and they were all accommodated at Central School. And to make them feel welcome, the school staff went way overboard and had their native carvers come in. They had their foods all shown, cooked for them. They had dancers. They had all kinds of things that really made them feel at home in Campbell River. And a number of them didn't leave Campbell River. They stayed on. Sandy Swanson, who lived in Sayward and commuted to Campbell River, she was a speech and language pathologist, and she wrote 3 items for this project. And one of them was a fire drill that they had at Elm Street. And Elm Street School at one time had been the board office. And it's quite a humorous article. She also wrote one about a float plane trip she had to Cortez Island. And it was during a southeaster. And that one it's really quite interesting how she got home. She didn't fly home. She got there though. And then I went on to the high schools, and Robron, Southgate and Robron. And when I hit the Southgate and Robron, there were all kinds of band pictures, and my children, of course, were in the Robron bands. And during that period of time, the whole, all the schools got invigorated, and everything became much happier when those music teachers hit our school district. They I don't know, the kids were happier, everything just seemed to run smoother, there was more energy in the school. And these teachers not only worked in the schools, they worked in the whole district, and there were children's choirs, and there were honor bands, and there were all kinds of things going on. And so I did a section on the music programs and special programs that were in the high schools, because the students started band now in grade 5, so they could read music by the time they got into grade 7, and they were away to the races. And everywhere during that time period, those kids were performing in town. They were in the mall, they were in the theaters, they were all over the place, all the bands, and it was like, I don't know, it was really a happy time, I guess. And so I did an extensive write-up on schools can become the center of communities, which they were. And the Robron band traveled all over, and some of their students were chosen to represent Canada on a Canadian Youth on Tour. And one of the Robron bands also went to Hong Kong for Canada Day, and they spent a week in Hong Kong, all expenses paid by the Canadian government, because they were chosen the best band in this huge festival that was in Toronto at the time. I also got some good write-ups from John Montgomery about his program at Phoenix and at Carey High, and his extensive travels all over the place. So it's really been enlightening for me. Then I have a section on Phillips Arm. Tom Kennedy taught there in 1977, and his anecdote of what happened to him is really funny. And Cynthia LeBrun closed the school on Phillips Arm, and she did a wonderful job on her article. And she had included pictures, and it's just really, really worth reading. Very interesting. And let's see, what else have we done? Right, and then during the 70s, there were a lot of children in the province that were killed doing outdoor activities, canoeing and swimming and all over the province. And the province was quite alarmed about this, because teachers and the youth were dying. And so they wanted an outdoor program to be established in the schools. And the place that had the outdoor program running was Strathcona Park Lodge. And so I read Myrna Boulding's book, and she and her husband taught at Carey High, Jim Boulding, and for a while. And the schools were so crowded in those days, in the late 50s when they came to Campbell River, that he had 76 kids in a PE class. And one of the articles, it says, he taught PE with a broken hockey stick in his hand. And I thought, how would you manage 76 kids? I had 44 the first year I taught school, and it was just bedlam. It was, you couldn't keep track of one end of the row, or run into the line that you were marching around to the front of the line. It was, anyway, and no teaching assistants, of course, in those days. So I have a write-up from a student in Victoria who attended Strathcona Lodge for these outdoor education sessions. And he wrote quite a lengthy article about one of the years he came. Many of the schools from other places in the province came here every year, brought students here to Strathcona Lodge every year for their outdoor education. And that's it. Oops, more than 10 minutes.
About the school district in 1946.
Oh, in 1946, yes, Campbell River was the largest school district on Vancouver Island.
There's lots of little tidbits in there.
Yeah, there are all kinds of things.
Most pictures.
50 people contribute to this project with information, pictures, and written anecdotes. There are over 100 pictures I chose from the museum archives, and numerous others from other sources. Natalie has the info on the project. There's also 7 copies of this overview that I have here. This is the one we sent out online to our members, and I have 57 books on order. They just read the overview here. Natalie also has a memory stick with other photos and all the write-ups that are contained in the book, if you would like to look at that. And there are 2 publication quotes that Natalie has, one from River Inc. and one from Cass Graphics to print 150 books. And 50 people contributed to the books, that's right, to the book.
How big are these books? They must be huge with all that information.
Well, they've got, it's going to be 250 pages, 11 by 8. And there are a lot of pictures, because the pictures, you know, you can read something in an article, but if you see the actual picture, it's like, oh my God, I never imagined it was that bad or that good or whatever. Anyway, so we have a couple of titles here that we're not sure what we're going to use, which one we're going to use. Living and Learning, the Schools in the Campbell River Area 1893 to 1993, or Schools 1893 to 1993, 100 Years of Living and Learning in the Campbell River Area. Those are the 2 that we've come up with so far.
Thank you. Trustee Hagan, you had a question.
Well, I was just going to say, this is quite a walk down memory lane here that you've given us. You know, my parents, we moved here and when the Willows Hotel burnt down. I always use that as the date, and went to school here. And often when I look backwards, I say that we're walking in the footsteps of giants. It truly is that. There were some pretty big footprints that were laid down in the whole area of people who moved here with hardly anything, and you know, no water, no anything, and yet education continued on. And yeah, it's quite interesting to listen to all the things that have gone on. Many of the names I knew and probably were my teachers that you were talking about. And so thank you very much for your time and energy you put into this. We shouldn't forget where we've come from, and I'm sure there's other ways of telling stories, but it's always nice to have pictures and articles that people's memories that really do matter. So I just want
It's the anecdotes from the teachers that make.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you for all the energy and effort you put into it. And there'll be other people's thoughts on what occurred. And we can both look at the same thing in different ways, but it's interesting to hear and see the pictures and listen to the articles. So thank you.
How many, pardon me, you have a price on this book, right?
Yeah.
What are you charging for it?
I thought you were supposed to have that in front of you. I think it's,
We did bring it.
just under, no, I didn't.
Well, we do
just-
have that information then.
Yes, you do,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, I guess at some point then we'll have to have a look at it and we'll have to get back to you with what we decide.
Natalie has for you a copy of this. She has also a selection of articles that I took from here to illustrate what's in the book. And she has the two costs from Cast Graphics and from River Ink.
Okay. So at some point then we'll have to have a look at that and we'll have to get back to you. Trustee Eddie.
I'd like to thank you very much, Barbara, for your time and for capturing almost a time capsule of settler education here in the Campbell River District. It captures a really beautiful history of settlement throughout Discovery Island and coming back down through those fascinating places in the woods that are just clearings that you feel like something might have happened there, but you're not exactly sure. Just as a quick question regarding the books and the cost of the book, will there be a cost to the purchase? Will the books be out for purchase?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. So will there be a cost recovery model or will it be something as like a fundraiser for the Retired Teachers Association?
No, I don't, they're expensive.
Oh, I don't know that.
Yeah, and I don't think we were going to use it as a fundraiser.
Okay.
No. We had gone to the Campbell River Foundation and thought there would be the fundraiser.
Right.
You know, they would give us the money and we would sell the books and we would be providing the funds that we receive for the books to our scholarships that we give out every year here. And that fell through. So I think we'll just be recovering costs.
Thank you so much.
What, did you explain why we're asking for the money?
Yes, oh, it's a
Yeah.
loan, yeah.
Yeah, you didn't say that.
Oh, didn't I? Well, you see, it's on that sheet that you're.
Because we will have that information.
Yeah, the idea was that if we have a loan, then we can charge for the books and recoup it and pay it back. We just don't have the funds.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
that better describes it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, at some point we'll be able to sit down and look over your proposal and then
Okay, well,
make
thank
a
you.
decision.
Thanks.
Can I
Thank
just
you.
say one aside? I don't even think John knows this, but I grew up here and I attended all the schools. I started in 1958 at Campbell. And then I taught for 35 years here.
Wow.
I graduated from the first high school in BC.
Big high.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, ladies. I really
Yeah.
appreciate
Nice
taking
seeing
all the
you again.
time and for the presentation.
Nice seeing you, Kat.
Nice to see you as well, Barbara.
She does the Discovery Islands and.
I agree. A very outer islander.
Okay. Take a minute here to get reorganized.
It's interesting.
It was fascinating, actually.
I love that kind of stuff.
Joyce has good stories of being a student from when her school went down and she had to go back and forth to Kerry High. And
Okay,
Yeah, my mom.
we will
Yeah.
then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the summer school 2021, and Associate Superintendent Kyle will be doing that presentation.
Good evening. I'm sure mine's not going to be quite as interesting and not quite down the memory lane, but I'm going to take you back to July. It's July. All right. So summer school, we can't talk about summer school without the adults that make it work. And I had the pleasure of working with Sean McLaughlin, the principal of summer school, and Kelly Gage, who was new to summer school and came as vice principal. Our model of doing a succession plan is Kelly has been there as an administrator and will take over the principalship next year. I can't emphasize how amazing they were to work with, and those teachers that worked with them just had nothing but compliments in terms of how they ran summer school. So it was such a successful group to work with. The teachers that came and worked with summer school came with their passions, and so they would put proposals forward, and they were their passions and ones that they knew kids would identify with. So the commitment of those teachers and the excitement of teachers after an exhausting year to still have that kind of energy for 2 weeks, and in some cases 4 weeks, was just really a great place of energy to be in the schools. So just to give you a sense of, and when I tell you what the summer school, some of the programs were, it's like, well, I want to do that one. I was going in and I had the pleasure of taking my 2 boys and 3 other boys to their summer school programs and hearing about Mandarin and hearing about innovation and science, and just the excitement that sometimes you don't get in the regular school day, but with summer school, with it being really their interest that they would sign up for was quite exciting. So in elementary, some of the programs were like marine biology, outdoor ed, Mandarin, inventions and innovators. And we also had a pre-K program at Cedar. And we had I think there was 8 kids at that one. So that was a great opportunity for those kids. At middle school, design and technology, summer garden and food security, wellness camp, solving mysteries and craft game strategy. So those are all, and that's just a sampling of what kids had to choose. And in secondary, it was predominantly math in secondary. They were doing upgrades and enriched in those areas. So in total, we had 648 students with wait lists in at least half of those programs. We've also got a great partnership that's been going on in Campbell for a number of years, and that is with the Rec and Read program. So we have 2 Rec and Read programs, and that's, again, to keep some of those kiddos engaged in school where they can continue their learning. The emphasis is on literacy and working with them to encourage and enhance what they've done during the school year. And that's a month-long program that includes lunches and a number of programs. So that's in partnership with the city, which is just a really valuable, invaluable partnership. So last year we ran in deficit because we weren't able to go to maximum class sizes, and this year we were able to run with a small surplus, which was the added bonus to a really vital and viable program that we're proud of in Campbell River and running it each year. So again, just can't say enough to the administrators and the teachers that were involved in our summer school. Any questions? Trustee Eddie.
I do have a question from a personal lens. Having a child that needed the grade 10 upgrade and they're not being offered this year during summer school, while I'm deeply appreciative of the elementary innovative programs at an academic level, he's now repeating the math that he couldn't get in summer school. So I'm wondering that if the registration is low, is there a plan B for those kids that, there's not enough students to run the summer school class, but they still need the credit?
Thank you for that, because there was actually an opportunity that was partnered with Rob Ron, so I'm not sure how that message didn't get forwarded, There were, I think, 6 or 7 students that took advantage of that to continue the areas that they needed some additional pieces in, not the entire course. So the entire course was not taught, but in those units where a student needed some extra learning to get credit for that course. So that, we did look at that. The registration for high school summer school was very low. 5 in the one that you're talking about, I believe we had 5. So we did look at some different opportunities for that, some flexible learning, but rather than course specific, we just didn't get the numbers at all.
Thank you.
But
Trustee
thank you
Hagan?
for that.
Oh, Trustee Hagan?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we incorporate, or if a school district, is it 71 in Courtney? If they are running a summer school as well.
I can't speak to that, to be honest.
Okay, I was just wondering that if there are some really unique areas that need, for a group of students, and if we could work and collaborate with other school districts to put something on where we have so many courses that are going online, and we could perhaps do some innovation in those areas, or even to a wider area, so that children who are falling through the cracks or need an upgrade, like you're talking about, where we can incorporate some of our innovation and to make sure that they're getting to where they want to be. It would be a shame to have to spend another half a year studying because you missed a course. And I'm using myself as an example. I remember I failed French 11 something or other, and you couldn't go to university without French 12. And so I had to go back for a whole half a year because of one course. And my French is awful. But I'm just hoping that now, with the real critical courses that are going on, that we could perhaps look at a wider spectrum of
how to address that. One of the things that I think the secondaries are doing, and doing a pretty good job of, is not having kids repeat. What we find is that there's areas that there needs to be enhanced learning from, not necessarily the whole course. So they are trying to do that within the schools. So we've kind of tasked them to say, how can we ensure that kids are not having to take summer school to repeat the whole course unless it's necessary or asked for, but how can we attend to that during the school year? But your points are well taken. I'll share that with, because I know that we did talk about that. I will share that with the administration for next year.
Trustee Hagan, you had another?
Yeah, I just want to let you know that I did hear some very, very good reports about summer school. So I thank you. We just have questions about how perhaps we can improve some areas from our end of things. But as far as success goes, we're really pleased with it. It is a great program. Over the years, I know I've seen it develop and grow and be some really great things for a lot of kids. So thank you for the two principal, the principal and the vice principal, and thank you for your report. Excellent.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate that Sean and Kelly couldn't be here. But if you would pass on the thanks to the board for their terrific work this year.
Absolutely. They'll appreciate that.
It really makes a difference just in the joy of learning for a lot of kids who are going to school because they want to be there to learn something that has it really resonates with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's the kind of thing that keeps kids coming back. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, Chair Kerr, if I may interrupt, we've been having some difficulties getting Trustee Richard Franklin to be able to join remotely. So he felt really strongly that he would like to participate in the next agenda item. So Barb is going to call him on the speakerphone and we're going to dial him in that way.
Okay, that would be fine. So I'll wait till he's in and then I'll begin now. No.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm just going to put you on speakerphone now and do part of the meeting, okay? Thanks. hear us okay?
Okay, well, the next item on the agenda is the vaccine mandate update. And I have a statement that the board has agreed to, and I'm going to read to it and then we will open any discussion on it. So, the subject of the proof of vaccination mandate for employees was dropped on boards of education by the Premier in early October. Since then, the Ministry of Education, the BC Public Sector Employers Association, the BC School Trustees Association, CUPE, the BCTF, First Nations Education Steering Committee, and several other groups worked on an advisory committee to establish sector guidelines for vaccination policies. The draft of these guidelines has been circulated to all relevant groups. Now boards will be required to do the work of following the guidelines to determine whether they will implement a proof of vaccination mandate in their districts. The School District 72 Board of Education intends to follow the process before making any decisions in this matter. Not only are there 5 steps to follow, but each must be done thoroughly and thoughtfully. Before making a final decision, the board is required to gather data and evidence in alignment with privacy rules, confirm alignment with legal advice, public health guidance and orders, and consult with employee groups and First Nations and engage the community. When those steps are complete, the board must decide whether to create a proof of vaccination policy and announce a decision. Please be assured that the board's main concern is, as always, the health and safety of our students and employees. Finally, the board takes this matter very seriously, and if it makes the decision to create a proof of vaccination policy for employees, it will direct the superintendent to implement an operational plan. Any decision the board makes will thoroughly consider the moral, legal, and labor implications of its actions. This will be a complex undertaking, and we ask your forbearance and understanding as we go through this process. Okay, are there questions or comments? Trustee Franklin, did you wish to add to the conversation?
No, I think what you said makes a lot of sense, Trustee Kerr, and we would be at the beginning of the process. It would be premature to really talk too much about it until we've got all the information and gotten the input from various sectors.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Hagan.
Yes, I'd be very interested in the data that we're going to be collecting and the presentation that would occur so that the board can make a good decision on which direction it should go. I hope we're not tasking too much of the superintendent to come up with a balanced point of view to be presented to the board, because it's very difficult these days to wade through all of the rhetoric. But if we get good, solid information, that's what I think that this board can sit down and look at and examine and make a fair, good decision that's responsible. But it's a good plan to get the information before us. I think there was a request at one point that we bring in the local health officer and perhaps make a presentation to us as well with some of that information that we're going to be gathering. So I really don't know enough about it to make a decision right now, but I do know that I could use a real good solid base of good solid information to make a decision.
Other comments? No? I guess one of the things that I have as a concern is that our main focus as a Board of Education is doing all that we can do to improve student achievement. I feel that this initiative or this order is going to take a lot of the time and effort from our senior management team that rightfully should be directed towards improving our student achievement. Superintendent Morrow mentioned in his in his remarks that we're seeing some improvement. But we have to be laser focused on this, and the whole topic of the vaccine mandate really, I guess, diffuses our focus somewhat on our student achievement. However, we will go through the process, and when we feel that we are ready to make a decision, we will make the appropriate decision, and then we will communicate it to our employees and to the, basically to everyone in this community. Trustee Hagan.
I just wanted to say something. I hope I didn't misspeak. And when I said that Dr. Morrow would present the information that he would be up to it. Yeah, I believe that Dr. Morrow can do just about anything in our district because he's such a bright and brilliant man. It's just that with, like you were saying, we have so many things going on in the district. And that was my only question, is that along with all the work that he has and everything else, to bring a report back to us so that we can make a decision in this. Hope that clarifies anything.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to educational issues, and Dr. Morrow, you're going to address the framework for enhanced student learning.
And thank you very much. I didn't expect to get a compliment out of a vaccine mandate conversation. I'll take that, Trustee Hagan. Thank you. But you've also set the stage, and I may not perform to the standard you've just articulated. I do want to move this conversation to student learning, and as Trustee Kerr mentioned, that has been the focus of the board. When I was hired 3 years ago as superintendent, it was very clearly articulated as an expectation that this board would hear about student achievement and that there would be a transparent manner of sharing data, both for the superintendent's accountability with trustees as well as the trustees' accountability with the public. And I want to share tonight some encouraging trajectories based on the data that is part of the reporting order. This is a ministry expectation that these particular measures are shared and that there's accountability in an annual report around these specific pieces of student achievement. So the great news is it's just after 8:30. We've got a 12-page report, and the great news is I'm going to start on page 6. So anytime we talk about student data, I think it's really important that when we're looking at numbers, that we fundamentally are reminded that each number represents an individual student trajectories, individual students' learning, and depending on the measures, individual students' life chances. So when we look at even improvement trends, until we have every single one of our students that starts with us in kindergarten, finish with us in grade 12, with every possible choice, option, and dignity when they cross that stage, we have work to do. And this report, although it is encouraging, is also a clear indicator of further work that our district needs to engage in. And so particularly of note for me, and part of the purpose of the framework for enhanced student learning is to surface whether there is ongoing disparity between outcomes between various groups of students, particularly between students of Indigenous ancestry and non-Indigenous. So we'll look at those pieces. I'm going to just start with, and it's a very small graph and small data set to look at, but just kind of looking in general at some of Campbell River's demographic data compared to the overall BC public school system. So we look at things like employment. Unemployment rate is higher in Campbell River than the provincial average by about 3%. So we see a slightly less number of people with post-secondary credentials, a little bit more lone parent families, and a median income that's less than the BC public school rest of the districts. With this here, these are data sets taken from EDI. That's the early developmental index that takes place with the grade 5 students, typically when they are in kindergarten. And in each of these data sets, these are indications, each of these is a vulnerability index. And the further to the right, the more vulnerable our students are compared to other districts in the province. So the most vulnerable district in the province is over on the right side of the scale, and the least vulnerable district is over on the left side of the scale. And you can see that we're on the right side here, on the left side of the average here. But what I wanted to point to for trustees, particularly as we talk about some of our aspirations that this board has articulated in our strategic plan around literacy is that we go very close to the far right around language and cognitive development as a vulnerability scale that's heavily present in Campbell River in our school district among students who are 5 years old. So that it just forms a little bit of the context and the demographics. So partly tonight, we are going to be looking at how our student data last year compared to other districts, as well as within ourselves, how we have compared last year to the previous 4 years of student data. So I'm going to start by looking at the literacy assessments in the foundation, the FSA. And I want to point out on the graph that the gray area represents basically the middle of school districts. So we want to be in every measure on the far, far right. We want to be way over here. And so when we're inside that, that means we're performing on par with the majority of school districts within the province. We're not underperforming and we're not overperforming in those specific outcomes. So we see last year 377 students wrote the Foundation Skills Assessment. And as far as their reading results, we're right in the middle, or right at the bottom of the middle of school districts. The encouraging piece for trustees is to note that this red line indicates the last 4 years where our achievement data has been. So we've been within that line. And the solid circle represents where our data was last year. So that's the most recent year. So this is the 2021 school district. So it shows that we still have a ways to go to be outperforming other school districts. But it does show that over the last 4 years, that last year was the highest in grade 4 reading assessments. Again, we can see this concerning trend in a number of our data sets across the district. And one of the goals of the strategic plan is to see equity across all measures. And we continue to see some disparity in our student results between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, or between Indigenous and all students. You can see some really encouraging results with the group of students who are identified with special needs actually outperforming all student groups last year in the grade 4 Foundation Skills Assessment. I wanted to point out this is a particularly strong achievement result for trustees to look at, to see that in grade 4 writing, although we've always actually performed within the middle over the last 4 years, you can see we've moved to the far right and we have just approximately over 90% of our students meeting expectations in grade 4 FSA writing results. You can see as well that the encouraging trend there is we've actually are in a higher performing district, and so we've moved not just to the right over the last 4 years, but actually out of and over into the positive pieces. We don't see the same far right of the filled in circle representing this year's results in reading. And we see that in grade 7 that we are falling below provincial expectations within being in a middle, even a middle performing district. So again, this is an area to continue to, I think as Chairperson Kerr referred to it, being laser focused in moving those assessments forward. Again, where we can see some positive results as far as Indigenous achievement, our Indigenous achievement last year had moved to the far right and certainly is within the 15th percentile. And again, we're seeing some encouraging trends with our grade 7 writing. And so we have seen some strength there. This is a fairly new assessment, the graduation assessment, which is why we're not seeing a 4-year result. That red line is missing, but you can see last year's results put us at or above here, the provincial sort of 50th percentile. So those are graduation, that's the literacy assessment in grade 10. Again, there's, as we drill down and look at data, there's good news and challenging news within this, which is we can see comparative to other years, last year was an increase in student achievement across all measures in literacy, or numeracy, excuse me, but we are not where we need to be. So when we are at the far right, we've improved, roughly 10% of more students are meeting numeracy expectations, but we're still falling below where we should expect to be. And so again, the encouraging piece about last year is that we are moving, and I think what we had stated, and I think what the board strategic plan really articulates in terms of achievement results was really to change that trajectory of declining student achievement and really seeing it move in that direction. I also want to be mindful it is a single year, although it's a data set that we've had for a number of years. The trajectory is encouraging, but we would be cautionary around over celebrating or being overly commiserate based on a single year result. You can see again with our graduation assessment, there was enough students in the numeracy 10 to be able to plot the assessment of our students, which shows again just above the middle district's performance, and not enough students in here to actually be able to say where last year's student achievement was. Grade to grade transitions, what we see is students that make it into grade 12 largely graduate, and I think there's further work for staff to do to explore when we have such a high success rate of students that make it in grade 12, when we look at our graduation rate, which still is an area of concern, that we're missing some transitions at younger grades. And so that's work that we further need to do. And I know that there's been some interest amongst trustees even around transitions from grade 8 or from grade 7 or grade 8 to grade 9 and from grade 5 to grade 6 and some of those marquee transitions. And that brings me to I think the most difficult data set, which I think if I was to redo this presentation, I would probably start here and finish with all of the positive data. But last year, and we've mentioned this last year in the spring, to trustees and the public, that our overall grad rate was very encouraging. However, we did see a decline in Indigenous graduation rates last year, and I believe that we will see that trend reversed and back over on the far right of that. But just to highlight that is an area that is deeply concerning, and interestingly enough, when you look at the actual data set last year of Indigenous students being 100, when we talk about statistics and we talk about percentages actually translating to students, when you look at a 59% grad rate, that means 41 of 100 Indigenous students who should have graduated last year did not. And I know that none of us will sleep well until that is changed, and I believe that will. And so I share that piece, and you can see again our overall grad rate is in red and our Indigenous grad rate is in blue, and we want to see a very, very tight, in fact, ideally we wouldn't actually be able to delineate them. I think that clearly is, as we look at all measures, continues to be core work that we need to continue to focus on. So. The other piece I think that is of interest to trustees as we talk about some of the transitions and impacts of the pandemic on various students, and we talked extensively, I know trustees are deeply committed to mental health and well-being amongst both our staff and our student population. When we look at last year's data set of do you feel welcome at school, that elementary students are over on the far right and largely feeling good and positive, and our secondary students, you can see, have moved to the far left. And so there's further questions that allow that kind of information for us to pursue and understand more fully, and we're hopeful as well that the conversation for students this year, having moved from a 1/8 model in the midst of this assessment to a quarter model, will hopefully improve some of those outcomes. So that is the end of the formal presentation, and of course, there's now time for questions.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Trustee Eddie.
I just have a question, Superintendent Morrow. On page 12, when we're looking at the do you like school responses, how many adults at your school care about you, under Indigenous in both grade 10 and 12, there's an MSK. What does that mean?
It just means that the data is masked because there wasn't sufficient participants.
For privacy.
For privacy, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Higgins?
You know, I really appreciated hearing the good and the bad. It really builds confidence in our leadership in this district, and we're not afraid to look at it honestly to say, what can we do to improve and celebrate the issues, the way we're doing things in the areas that we are doing better in, and the transitions, and I think as a district as a whole, I feel that people are becoming more and more confident in the leadership style and in the leadership that we have in the board office, because they know but the truth is being told to school trustees. And I think that's very important. Tonight it was in a conversation, it was mentioned that a lot of employees are getting weary. I mean, we have COVID, we have, it just seems to go on. And I want you to know, as a district, that the superintendent and the board office lets trustees know exactly. He's not, or they're not painting a picture where it's always rosy. And what the board wants to do, I believe, is to let the district know that we want the best for you, and we thank you for the good work that you're doing, that it's not an easy time, that we all get tired, we all get this COVID weariness that comes over us another day. But as you can see, learning is occurring. We're being told exactly what's going on, and we're excited for the future. And I believe that you should be encouraged to know we're really grateful for the work that you're doing.
Okay, Trustee Franklin, if you have anything to add, would you make yourself known, because I don't know if you want to take part in the conversation or not, so you'll have to just make it known clearly.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. There's an old, I guess an old saying, what gets measured gets done. And there's been a lot of measurement here. And when you've got accurate data, it allows you to target very scarce resources most efficiently. And so I think that when we have this information, with the limited resources we have, we can allocate those in ways that provide the best, the old expression is bang for the buck. So, we can allocate those resources to get the best bang for our buck with our students' education. So this is really encouraging to know, because as well as the things that are positive, the challenges are also out there. That allows us to look at those and to really closely examine them and to take measures to change them, because we know they're there. And next year we're going to know where they were this year and paying attention to where they are next year. So there's probably a bit of pressure on everybody in the system for improvement, but that's the way it should be, as long as it's not onerous. And it's good to see accurate data, to see where we are. So thank you very much for that. Any other comments? All right. So business administration. Secretary Treasurer Patrick, statutory right-of-way, Mary Point Road on Cortez Island.
Yeah, so I'll just give a little bit of background. City West Cable is working with the Strathcona Regional District on a Connected Coast initiative, which brings high-speed fiber optic cable around Vancouver Island from Vancouver all the way up the coast to Haida Gwaii. And a lot of our schools on our remote islands will get access to this remote cable. Now, in order to do that, though, there actually is a physical wire that goes all those thousands of kilometers around the island, but it has to come on land. And City West is asking for a statutory right-of-way to run some cable across a school district property. The property address is C4 Road, but we have a site on Cortez that actually has a road going right through it. And in your package, you've got a picture. Basically, they're going to run a fiber optic cable about 2 feet off the edge of the pavement, but it's really on the shoulder of the road. And by granting the statutory right-of-way, it makes sure that the cable won't be disturbed by us in the future. So, but minimal disruption because it is on the shoulder of the road. There's already a road there. It won't limit the board in any manner. Basically, there's no cost to the board. They install, and it'll be a statutory right-of-way grant, really in exchange for the benefit that ultimately our schools will get with the fiber optic cable. This fiber optic cable will serve the entire community of Cortez. So We do have a bylaw, which is a 3 reading, if the board supports it.
Okay, I will note that trustee Franklin will be recusing himself from the meeting for this discussion because he is the chair of, what's the organization again?
Connected Coast.
Yeah, he's chair of the Connected Coast organization that is responsible for bringing fiber optic cable to all of the isolated communities on the east side of Vancouver Island and also to some of the islands. So we will move on there. So the property bylaw is that the bylaw to approve a statutory right-of-way over Mary Point Road, Cortez Island, parcel identifier 009-668-870, be given all 3 readings at this meeting. Moved by trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Eddy. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, motion is passed. So we move into the bylaw. That the bylaw to approve a statutory right-of-way over Mary Point Road, Cortez Island, parcel identifier 009-668-870 is hereby read for the first time. Moved by trustee Wilson, seconded by trustee Eddy. Any discussion? All those in favor? The motion is passed. Second reading. That the bylaw to approve a statutory right-of-way over Mary Point Road, Cortez Island, parcel identifier 009-668-870 is hereby read for the second time. Moved by trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Eddy. All those in favor? The motion is carried. And we will move on to the final reading, that the bylaw to approve a statutory right-of-way over Mary Point Road, Cortez Island, parcel identifier 009-668-870 is hereby read for the third time, passed and adopted. All those in favor? Okay, the motion is carried. So that is.
We get a seconder
We didn't get a first and seconder on.
on the 3rd reading.
I'm sorry, could we have a mover on the 3rd reading? Trustee Eddy, seconded by trustee Wilson. Okay, all those in, trustee Hagan, you're voting on this?
I'd just like to make a comment that I think this is going to be an excellent project, and I'm so glad that our schools in these remote areas are going to have internet access without the use of big, huge cell towers, that there's an actual landline that's going in all over the coast, and I think it will expand right across, and we may see even better service for some of the areas that are over here as well. But I think it's a great thing that's occurring, and I'm glad that this is moving forward.
Okay, thank you. So all those in favor? Okay, the motion is passed.
Thank you.
Okay, committee reports. So we will start off with trustee Wilson, the report on the October 3rd Vista Conference.
Yes, it was short, as these online ones can sometimes be compared to in person, but it was informative. Our guest speaker was Dr. John Chenoweth from School District 58, who spoke about truth and reconciliation and how it can be applied and needs to be applied in the different school districts, basically speaking to the ideal, talking about the process of implementing and how it can't be contradictory or put downs, but the understanding needs to be reached in order to move ahead. That was followed by a very informative COVID health update by 2 doctors from VHA. And I won't try to summarize it because things change so quickly, but they gave a very interesting presentation with statistics. And I would have to say that part of their main message was not to become overreactive or to be too, well, we'll just leave it at that, but basically to keep yourself as informed as you can and you know, look at your own local community and just basically to look as many other tools as we can and without going directly to restrictions. So it was a very level-headed presentation, I'd have to say. And beyond that, we had reports from the president and various liaisons and directors. So it was informative.
Thank you very much. Any
Yep.
questions or comments? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the report on the October 15th Ministry of Education Partner Liaison meeting. That was followed the chair's meeting on October 14th, 2 full days. I've circulated the report on the provincial board chairs meeting and the partner meeting. Some concerns that were brought up. Vaccination mandate was one big concern that was brought up throughout the day. And it was mainly concerned with the announcement by the Premier in early October without significant detail and concerns that there will be little provincial support for districts. And that was expressed by the chairs. And there were concerns in certain areas of the province with recruitment and retention of professional staff. And many districts in the more isolated parts of the province are having difficulty retaining staff, and some are experiencing staffing shortages. And there are one other item that was brought up by several trustees in discussions where there were issues with vaccination refusal possibly leading to staffing shortages if a significant number of staff refuse to be vaccinated and a vaccination mandate is included as a condition of employment. So those were major concerns. We had a panel that included Deborah Jeffries, who is a FINESC director, Denise Augustine, Ministry of Education, and that's Indigenous Education, and Dr. Charles Ungerleider, who's a name from the past, who is a professor emeritus at UBC and also former Deputy Minister of Education. To really quickly summarize it, all three participants in this panel pointed out the necessity for having accurate data so that decisions can be made on allocation of resources, as we were talking about here. And all three supported the value of the foundation skills assessment, despite the fact that the BCTF is adamantly opposing it, because from an Indigenous perspective, we're saying that it is the only measure that they have that is province-wide that allows them to look at the achievement of Indigenous students as compared to non-Indigenous students to see where any gaps are and to see where more resources need to be allocated to improve achievement in areas that are identified by those assessments. And one of the phrases that kept coming up in, I think both Deborah Jeffries and Denise Augustine mentioned it, and they're both Aboriginal people. They said that without data, Aboriginal students are subject to the racism of low expectations. And they talked about the difference between a dogwood and an adult dogwood. And a dogwood certificate for graduation requires 80 credits. A adult dogwood requires 20 credits. And they were concerned that in many districts, Indigenous students are being streamed into the adult dogwood program. So if they graduate and they have a dogwood certificate, and that's okay, but the problem comes for those who wish to apply for post-secondary programs and they find out that they don't meet the criteria for admission to programs, say at BCIT or Malaspina or one of those places, so that they end up having to go back, either just dropping out and not doing it, or else going back and having to take time to do stuff that one would have expected that they would have finished by the end of grade 12 or even a 6th year in high school. So that's one of the really strong points that they made. They also made a point that less than 50% of students in care graduate, and 60% of the students in care in this province are Indigenous. So it's really important that school systems do what they can to address the needs of First Nations children and their communities. And again, they point out that accurate data plays a key role in helping address the racism of low expectations experienced by First Nations students. So both the following speakers again pointed out the importance of data and the importance of participation in the FSA. That's that they saw that as one of the things that gives us information that allows us to address some of those discrepancies between Indigenous achievement and graduation. So that was, you know, certainly it brought the point home very strongly to board chairs who were sitting there. There was a discussion on surplus policy, and they refer to there's a surplus policy document that we can refer to. The last session of the day was on vaccination mandate, and Minister Whiteside came in and spoke to us about it. And one of the points that she made is that there's a moral imperative for boards to take measures that will ensure the health and safety of students. In her presentation, she never directly said it, but it was implied that boards should implement a vaccination policy. When President Higginson brought that up prior to the minister coming, there was some really strong pushback from some trustees from the interior and the north. So it was quite a discussion, got tense for a while. So anyway, certainly gave us lots to think about how we do things in the system. The following day, we had a partner meeting, and that was where the secretary, treasurer, the superintendent, and the board chair from each district sat at the same table, and there were 2 districts represented at the table. There was pointing out that let's see, I've got to get my other page here. Yeah, okay. The next morning, Minister Whiteside again started the session with it, and started the day with a session, and she talked again about the proposed vaccination mandate. Yeah, she said that the province does not have statutory authority to impose a vaccination mandate on boards in the absence of a provincial health order, and there is no provincial health order. Dr. Henry has not issued one. So that puts us in the position of where we are. On the matter of reconciliation, the province expects improvement in this area, but there will be no changes to the funding formula to address this. Before and after school childcare was mentioned, but there was no mention of funding at this time. And the minister noted that the government has committed $3.5 billion to replace and seismically upgrade schools. Maybe some of that will come our way for Cedar, we hope. It's really important, again, this whole data piece that the minister said that boards need to determine who is not being served. And she said that racism exists in the system and must be dealt with. And public institutions will play a pivotal role in this change. The next session was on the foundation, FESL, on improving educational for all students in the BC education system, with an emphasis on improving achievement on Indigenous students, children and youth in care, and students with disabilities or diverse abilities. So there was a wide-ranging, there were some pretty deep discussions at the table, and there were some pretty important questions asked of the presenters. It certainly was busy, busy 2 days. I missed the final wrap-up session, so maybe Secretary Treasurer Patrick or Superintendent Morrow might address the final hour.
It was another session on racism, general racism across the sector, with asking boards and districts to address it.
Okay. All right, Trustee Hagan.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when they were talking about Dr. Henry Bonney not putting a provincial mandate out for
order.
The province's argument, the minister's argument for trying to push boards into making that decision was which? I'm just trying to understand. Was there a discussion around that?
There were some pretty pointed questions asked. One of the questions asked of the minister was, in the absence of a provincial health order, or an order from the provincial health officer, what evidence do you have that this is needed in our school districts? And I would point out that the minister spoke on that topic for 3 or 4 minutes and never actually addressed the issue of evidence. So I can't answer that question.
No, I was just
we were
in the conversation.
Yeah,
That's all.
you know as well as I do that we found out about it on the news. You know, at least I found out about it on the news. I watched Premier Horgan on the news saying that there was going to be a vaccination mandate for district employees, and the districts will be responsible for doing it. And that hasn't changed. I haven't heard any further information on the justification for it. Okay, Trustee Eddie.
Trustee Kerr,
Yes.
Richard Campbell here. Did anybody ask why is it they can make a provincial mask mandate, but not a vaccine mandate?
Yes, the question was more extensive than that. It was, how can you impose a provincial mask mandate on the education sector? How can you impose vaccination mandate on long-term care centers and on the health system when you are not the direct employers, but you can't do it for the system, and you're saying that you're not the direct employers? So yeah, that question was asked, and it was answered with, as I said, that the government does not have the statutory authority to do that. So I will leave out my editorial comment on that, but the answer was that the government does not have the statutory authority because they are not the direct employer. Do you have a follow-up or any comment?
No, that answers my question. You can't see me, but I'm just shaking my head in wonderment.
You weren't the only one. There was a lot of that in that meeting. I think the general feeling was that from a lot of trustees, it was presented as respecting school board's autonomy, but a lot of trustees felt and expressed the idea that trustees have been handed a political hot potato, and that there was a request. There certainly was the expression from many of the chairs there that, and much as the BCTF has done, is that the province impose the vaccination mandate. But that being said, it is what it is, so we have to deal with it. Okay, Trustee Eddie.
So off topic of vaccines and going back to day one when you were talking about the guest speakers discussing the adult dogwood versus the dogwood,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Superintendent Morrow, do we have any data on whether or not that was a graduating practice in our district? Or do we have like some data around how many Indigenous students graduate with an adult dogwood versus more traditional dogwood?
Yeah, we will have that data. I don't have it handy, but I certainly can get that data to trustees.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. I think I may have misspoken on the numbers. My notes here say that the dogwood certificate requires 8 credits and the adult dogwood requires 20.
It's 80 and 20, you were correct.
80 and 20. Dogwood requires 80 and adult requires 20. I had it written down incorrectly. Are there any questions, other questions or comments on this? Okay, we'll move on to the report on the October 22nd Student Leadership Committee meeting. Trustee Briggs.
Yeah, we had our first in-person meeting here in the boardroom. Unfortunately, Trustee McMahon and our 2 Rob Ron delegates had to send their regrets, but we had 8 students representing Southgate, Phoenix, Carey High, and Timberline, and they came on their day off on a Friday. The students were open to sharing both positive and constructive feedback and advice for the board, some of which was quite candid and brought many smiles. It was refreshing to hear directly from the students, and it was very clear that they're comfortable sharing their legitimate concerns with the superintendent and myself. We discussed student-led topics such as the greater need for both student and teacher IT support and training, vaping issues in schools, TikTok, the need for more outdoor seating, that's covered areas, pandemic protocol enforcement and impacts, grade transitions, timetables, sexual health, and graduation. They also wanted to know how their feedback would be used and if they were being heard. Superintendent Morrow has several direct action items to follow up on and ideas for the direction of future meetings to explore topics further and to share with the students where the district is making progress in regards to their feedback. We aim to meet monthly on Microsoft Teams and several times a year in person. And trustees are encouraged to think about when our decisions as a board could benefit from direct student input and to take their advice and experience into consideration where we can when making our decisions.
Thank you.
Do you have anything to add, Jeremy?
That's very thorough, Trustee Briggs, thank you.
I think it's great that you've got people who have come to the meeting prepared with ideas that they can communicate clearly to you.
There were some excellent feedback shared. I was quite impressed with the caliber of students we had around the table.
It's kind of nice to see the product of parental and school district efforts to turn out really self-reflective and thinking young adults. Okay. Then the next item will be the report on the October 23rd BCSTA Provincial Council meetings, and that's Trustee Wilson.
Yes. It was very well attended, and I'm just going to give very few highlights here, very brief highlights. The President's report introduced the new CEO after many, many years of having Mike Roberts being the CEO. Our new CEO is Suzanne Hoffman, and she's very excited to be there and has only been there for 3 weeks, but is fitting in very nicely. Also, part of her report talked about how everyone hoped would be in a different place for the start of this school year, but as by comparison, a friend of hers in Oregon had her children return to school for the first time in 542 days. So she said that as a province, we can take great pride in how we're able to continue with in-person learning for most of the 2021 school year. She mentioned looking ahead that it is going to be very important to properly support trustees in an era of truth and reconciliation. So a lot of new trustee training has to happen to ensure that we're properly preparing trustees for the work that lies ahead next year. There will be a trustee election next year, so of course they're starting to plan for that. So that is approximately a year from today's meeting that the next election will be province-wide, at least if we stick to the 4-year schedule. Also, framework for enhancing student learning was discussed, and I think that talking about identifying student needs in each district is a really critical starting point, and it's really good to see how our starting point is already showing some positive results. And then the majority of her report was talking about the vaccine mandates that all districts are going to have to follow. And she did say there have been concerns expressed that this was not mandated provincially, although local people, it gives our local boards an opportunity to look at their own local situations. And her comment was that even though we're not under a provincial health order to have a mandate, the good part of that is that it means schools continue to be considered low risk environments. So that kind of addresses the question you had brought up, Trustee Hagan, a few minutes ago. And I won't say more about that because so much of that was already mentioned in Chairperson Kerr's remarks about how to proceed step by step with these guidelines for reaching the individual decisions that districts are going to have to reach. So the rest of the meeting was taken up by oral reports, written reports, updates on tracking motions, action items, and there were only 3 motions to Provincial Council, and 2 of them passed very quickly, and the third one I missed because my computer shut down. It was a windy Saturday morning, and I just decided that was enough. So I'm sorry, I can't report on that. But it was a good meeting. Thank you.
Okay, the next item. Oh, any questions or comments? Okay. The next item is the School District 72 City of Campbell River Liaison Committee meeting that was held yesterday at City Hall. And I'll just go through a list of topics that were discussed, and if there's anybody needs any clarification on them, I can address those. But the city had brought some items, and first one was the update on the sidewalk on Cheviot Road, and the second one was a joint use agreement for underutilized fields, and it has to do with the Campbell River Youth Soccer Association. The third one was Evergreen School status, and they're talking about the lands, I think. And the next one was South Alder and Dogwood crosswalk and traffic lights are planned for December 21 or January 22. And then I think that may have been brought up by the school district, I should say. Next item was Highway 19 sewer project and the effect it's had on busing schedules. The sixth one was the Carry High bus pullout, and there needs to be some legal matters taken care of, the property survey map and license to occupy. Item 7 was a presentation on Cedar School replacement, and item 8 was a complaint from the Shades of Green housing complex about parents parking in what the complainant thought was a dangerous, a place that was dangerous. Okay, so that was it. That was pretty much what we discussed. Are there any questions or comments on that? Anybody want any further detail? No, I did kind of late. Okay, and then the last item will be the Cedar School Replacement Committee update. We haven't had a meeting, but things have been happening. So I'll just go through some of the things that have been happening since our last meeting. The first thing is our QB President, Andrea Craddock, wrote an absolutely terrific letter to the Ministry of Education and our MLA, urging them to advocate for the replacement of Cedar Elementary. Ms. Craddock also emailed all QB members urging them to write to the minister and the MLA requesting that they push for the replacement of Cedar Elementary, so the members. Deb Coombs, the CRDTA president, asked Ms. Craddock if she could use her QP letter as a template for a similar advocacy letter for her members. I don't know if that's been done yet, but she at least asked, according to Ms. Craddock. The committee has sent a letter to all School District 72 employees asking them to write the minister and the MLA as well. Presentation consisting of the handout and video prepared by Jennifer Patrick, our Community Engagement Officer, was done at the School District 72 City Council Liaison meeting yesterday. Mayor Adams indicated that City Council would support the district in any way it could. And Councilor Moglove as well indicated her support. As a follow-up to the meeting, the presentation at the last meeting that we had, several members of the Indigenous Education Advisory Council have asked for additional meetings for their group for further detail. And finally, the superintendent and board chair will be scheduling a meeting with Chiefs Roberts and Chikite in November, and further updates on the Cedar replacement will be an update on that will be hopefully we'll include that as part of the agenda. So that's That's where we are with that. Any questions or comments? Okay. Then we will move there. Is there any other business? Oh, Remembrance Day Ceremonies. Seeing as how we won't be attending in person, the district will be, as has been the practice in the past, will be buying a wreath which will be placed at the cenotaph by somebody from the Legion. I think people can go, but there's not a formal ceremony. I think probably if anybody wanted to go at 11 o'clock, but I think COVID protocols would stand. But anyway, we will be taking part in that. We will be purchasing a wreath that will be placed on the cenotaph. And okay, any other business that anybody? I guess nobody has anything now. Okay, so we will move into the. Before we move to item 16, I'm going to read a statement here about just the process. As we move into our question period on the agenda, I would like to remind our online audience that we will only accept questions on agenda items that were discussed this evening. This is not open for personal commentary. Opinions or views that one wishes to share with the trustees should be done in writing by sending a letter to the Board of Education. So, are there any questions from anyone present on the, or anyone on the agenda items for this meeting?
Yes, Chairperson Kerr and members of the board, we've had a number of questions come in throughout the course of the meeting. The first one is a question from somebody wondering which trustees went to the Vancouver meeting to discuss vaccine mandates.
I did. It was a meeting for chairs, so I was the representative.
The next question is asking if you can please explain the purpose of mandating vaccines for staff and how it will help make our children safer when vaccinated people can still spread the disease, are exposed to more people in their day, for example, restaurants, concerts, flights, etc., and may not have any symptoms where they would otherwise stay home from work.
I think that's a question that will need to have some serious thought before it's responded to. So I won't be responding to that right now. Okay, I don't know if anybody else wants to address it.
I would just suggest, I think, that kind of detailed public health information will be relying on our local public health authority to help us with the data to inform that answer.
And perhaps that question might be asked of the health officer, our district health officer. They would be able to better answer that question than we would. As I've often said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical expert, an epidemiologist, or a public health, have great knowledge in public health. So I have to go on the information that we get, and we are just at the beginning of the process of gathering information on vaccine mandate, as we've mentioned in our, in our previous comments. Trustee Hagan.
Yeah, I think the question's an excellent question and should be part of the gathering of information, just like the superintendent suggested, and you, that we can consider all of these questions when it comes time to have the information, all of the information presented at the same time.
I'm suggesting that it might be a more efficient way for them to get that information by contacting the district health officer, Dr. Charmaine Enns, I think, is that the correct name?
Well, there's a few, but that's one of the island public health officers.
Yeah, she's in this area, is she not?
She is.
Yeah, so perhaps contacting Dr. Enns for that information would get the information a lot more quickly and a lot more efficient, and like a lot more detail than we could get.
The next question, what options are there very soon for parents to meet in person with the board to share concerns with regards to a vaccine mandate?
The board, well, I will answer this and then anybody can add to it or correct me if I'm wrong. The board takes public presentations, but the presentations will be by the presenter. And it has to be on the agenda, so it would need to be submitted. The presentation would need to be submitted on the Wednesday before the next meeting. The next meeting we have is on November 16th, so that person would need to submit their presentation by noon on November 10th. I don't know if I'm correct on that. I think, yes.
I just have a little something to add. Just referring to the sector guidelines that were released by BCPC. Boards have received kind of a draft copy of ways to move forward through this process. And as the first is to contact our public health departments to gather all the pertinent, relevant health data that we honestly don't really, we need the health to describe. But as we move down through the 5 steps that they've asked us to really thoroughly go through prior to making a decision, number 3 is the consultation with employee groups, First Nations communities, and the broader community as a whole. So it's my thought that likely that will be the point in which we're reaching out to the parents in our community to provide some feedback around helping us to guide our decision process.
The next question, will you be listening to national health professionals that have different assessments of the effectiveness or need of vaccinations or just public health?
Question. That's a tough question.
Yeah, I think we will be going, my understanding is that we will be going with information from our public health experts in British Columbia. There are 10 public health officers in primarily across Canada and provinces, and I think the territories have 3 more. And there's a federal health officer. So typically we base our information on our provincial health officer. I could be wrong on this, and there may be more information that comes in, but I think we can, I guess, get a tremendous amount of information from various number of sources, and sometimes it's very difficult to sort through and find out which is the accurate information. So we need to, I guess personally, I would say that we need to be listening to established sources who have expertise in these areas. Trustee Hagan.
Yeah, so that's why I mentioned earlier that this is going to be a big job for Dr. Morrow, is that I think we need a broad perspective of good, solid information, and we can't just listen to one voice. I think we to make an informed decision. I think we need to balance the information we get from all sources, and I think that Dr. Morrow is up to the task. It's just a very difficult one, and I think we all need patience during this time. We're not in a hurry to make a decision. We just want to get the right information in front of us. And I think if we have a balanced perspective, that this board is up to that task.
The next question that came in with regards to vaccine mandates is a 2-part question that the first part kind of is along the same lines as the last question. So could we bring in another health professional to speak with a different opinion and perspective to consider rather than those in favor of the provincial health mandates? I think you've just sort of addressed that already. And then the second part is who is going to represent the teachers and EAs that don't have a voice at the school board meeting?
The teachers
in EAs that don't have a voice.
Teachers and EAs have a union, and they can bring their concerns to their union presidents, and their union presidents can be in contact with us as well. I don't know anything more that we could do. Do you have any other?
Yeah, I would just, I guess the simplest answer is teachers and educational assistants have a voice in this district, and certainly the board is very attentive to those, and I would even say too to parents that are concerned. We've received correspondence over the last 20 months. The board has attended to each bits that have come in, and all of those pieces will be factored into the decision making as part of the data set. So yeah, I would just really strongly encourage whoever wrote that question, just that there is a strong voice for all members of our staff community at this table.
Okay, so moving on from the vaccine mandate agenda item, the next question was with regards to the framework for enhanced learning. In the data, was it clear in the question, do you feel safe at school, was connected to the anti-bullying, welcoming environment, or were students commenting on feeling safe at school due to a pandemic and lack of protocols?
That's a good question. I think the context isn't specific, so it wasn't specifically related to either, and so students would have responded based on both those experiences.
The next question, did I understand the comments regarding the Ministry of Education Partners Liaison meeting that in one of the panel discussions regarding the FSA that Indigenous representatives support the FSA assessments and data?
That is exactly right. They were very strong in their support of the FSA because they felt that because it was probably the only instrument that was used for assessment province-wide, they could get a big, I guess, a 1,000-foot view of where Indigenous students are in their achievement as compared to non-Indigenous students. So it was very unambiguous, their support for the FSA.
And the next question, can you share how the Student Leadership Committee was formed and whether or not there was a lens to ensure that it includes a diverse group of students that includes voice of all students, such as Indigenous, special needs, LGBTQ+, etc.?
I can speak to that. So we asked each school to select 2 students with a wide range of criteria in the hopes that we have a committee that is very reflective of the diverse student body.
Okay, so I'm just checking the last bit of the Q&A feed. The person that was asking about conversations with the board has come back again. Wondering what options there are for parents to have an open and respectful in-person discussion with the board and not give a presentation. They felt that the question wasn't fully answered, as many parents are interested in knowing.
I think at this point, we are restricted to presentations just because of numbers. And the presentation gives a person some time to prepare their thoughts and to bring them to the board in the clearest and I guess the most efficient manner possible. We're not looking at having I guess an open meeting at this point, simply because of the restrictions that we have. So I think we're looking at presentations unless somebody wishes to contradict me on that. Yeah, and a presentation is a presentation, it's not a debate. So a person can come in, present their point, let us, so we will understand what their point is, and then that will be the end of that presentation.
Presentation, or if I may also suggest maybe letters to the board as well.
Letters, yes.
You've indicated that you've received a number of them through the last, the period of the pandemic.
Yes, letters, presentations. Trustee Hagan.
I might suggest, I had on step 3, it was, wasn't it? That I believe that the board will have to wrestle with some kind of a meeting so that people can be consulted and feel talked to and understood. I think if we're going to follow right through on the perspective, we're going to gather information first. I think at any point we can make a decision, but I think if we plan to keep on going down the steps, that at some point the board will have to come up with some way of having a conversation with people, and what that looks like, I think the board needs to talk about first. But I think we need to get the just sheer data before us first. Mm-hmm. And if that allays any concerns, but step 3 does include wanting to talk to groups of people who are concerned about decisions that we're going to be making. And I think if we have good information first, then we can go on to step 2 and step 3. And I would presume that we will be posting and giving updates on how that meeting would occur and what it's going to look like, and are open to suggestions on how that could occur. But right now, we're not that far along. And please, if we can allay your fears at all, we will be talking to everyone that we can to make a good decision. And you won't be excluded because of some kind of protocol of COVID. We want to hear from you, but how that meeting's going to occur, we have to carefully plan for. And that's what step 3 looks like, and we haven't gotten there because we've never been there before.
Trustee Franklin?
I just wanted to amplify 2 things. Number 1, folks shouldn't have any thought that the board is considering a vaccine mandate for students. It's got nothing to do with students. We've been directed by the premier of the province to look at employees, but students are totally off the table. The second piece of that is, and I'm sure the other trustees, we are very interested in the emails received. I received a very interesting email that had a video attached to it today. I watched it very carefully, and that is one of the many pieces of information that I'll be considering when I go ahead and, make my decision. And the various points of view, people need to express themselves, and I certainly look forward to hearing from people on the emails. For sure, it's safe, respectful, and I know that for myself, and certainly for the rest of the trustees, I'm sure as well, when I receive an email from a constituent, I read every word that they say. And in the end, a decision has to be made. And I guess this is why we make the big bucks, because it's basically you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Somebody's not going to be happy, but we have to respectfully listen to and read whatever anybody sends and take it all into consideration. There's quite a range of point of view on this particular topic, and it's going to be an extremely difficult decision for all trustees.
Thank you. And I would just reiterate what Trustee Franklin said, is that this whole process as at its end point, the board making a decision as to whether or not it will mandate proof of vaccination for School District 72 employees, no one else. Just so that's very clear. Other questions?
Can I maybe just say one thing? I just want to say, as an observer of board decision making in both in-camera and out-of-camera meetings, that 100% of the decisions that this group of trustees makes is in the best interest and the well-being of staff and students, and that doesn't mean everybody always will agree, or that there's always consensus, but every decision that I've observed this board make has been about what is in the best interest of the people they serve, and I know that this will be the same in this instance. So I know for those people that are asking those questions, we've heard from parents over the last 20 months who feel we haven't done enough, and other parents who feel our policies and protocols are too much. And we will navigate this piece with data, and I know that trustees will make that decision that is consistent with the ways in which those decisions have been made that I've been able to observe over the last 3 years.
Thank you. Okay. No other questions? Trustee Higgins?
Move adjournment.
All those in favor? We're done.